So you want to be a better DM? Well, in this video, I hope to show you some tips and tricks that will help you polish off and fine-tune your game. They should help you to deliver your game more effectively and engage your players more into the story and the world that you're building. So sit back and relax as we make your D&D experience easier. And the Dungeon Master. A master storyteller, battle strategist extraordinaire, improvisational genius, comedian, and many more things besides. The DM has a lot to juggle at once, and unless you've been doing it for a long time, this can be a bit of a challenge. So in this video, I'm going to look at the top 7 things that I feel the DM needs to be ready with before they begin any session. These tips will apply to brand new DMs to help you better understand your game, and even some veteran ones too. It's never too late to refine your craft. Now, a quick disclaimer about all these tips: they are by no means the only things that a DM needs to be aware of, but they are the ones that I found to be particularly helpful, especially in the beginning. There are many more tips and tricks out there that aren't mentioned in this video, so if you feel like there's anything I've missed that's particularly important, please leave a comment down below and let me know what you think should have been added to the video. One last thing then before we get started with the video: if you could hit that like and subscribe button and maybe leave a comment, they really do help the channel out, so thank you very much. Okay, now with all that out of the way, let's get started with number 1 in the top 7 tips to help you be a better DM. Now, starting at number 1, we have the most important thing every single DM needs to do, and that is be prepared. Nothing could be more important than be ready for your game. Unfortunately now, this does require you to put in a bit of time outside of the game to be ready for the next session. Nothing's worse than you sitting down to play a game that sometimes have taken even weeks to get set up and started, and to start fumbling your way through the session. Players don't want to be sitting around waiting on you to read the next paragraph in the adventure guide to figure out what has to happen next. They want you to know what's going on. A pro tip here now to help you with this is to create yourself a small bullet point sheet. Here you can write down all the important things that are going to be happening in the upcoming session, so that you're easily reminded of what has to happen. You do still need to read the adventure and know the details to an extent, but having just the main points written down does help you to jog the memory and keep the game going. Another handy tip is to have all your monster and NPC stats sitting on a separate page just off to the side behind your DM screen, so you can easily just kind of jump to those as you need them, instead of having again leaf through massive pages and books to try and find what you're looking for. Your players don't come to play D&D to watch you flick through a book. They want to keep the game going, so having these things on hand that you don't need to stall and stop the game for this really helps to flow and really just engages the players more. The next thing we're going to look at is railroading, and basically how not to railroad. Some of you may be familiar with the notion of railroading already, but in case you're not, railroading means basically making your players do what you want them to do, instead of letting them do what they want to do. Now, in most adventure guides, the guides will say that the players should go here or talk to this NPC or something like that. However, very likely your players have actually no idea what they should go and do, and instead will kind of just wander off to wherever they think is most interesting. This can leave the DM high and dry with nothing prepared, and this could be a big problem. But fear not, we have the solution for you to stop any of that happening. Now, this is going to sound pretty counterintuitive, but you basically need to creatively railroad them. And now I say that and people are going to go, "Ooh, railroad, don't want to hear about that." But hear me out. Essentially, you let the players go wherever they want to go, and wherever they go, they happen to meet that NPC that they were supposed to meet earlier, or the event that was supposed to happen somewhere else happens in the place that they decided to go to. For example, they were supposed to meet a hunter in the woods, but they decided that that doesn't sound like it's any fun, so they decide to go instead shopping. And God, everyone hates shopping. But they do, and they end up in a shop, and lo and behold, there is that hunter who is looking for a new bow, and he's able to engage them in conversation and continue on the story as the guide dictates. This will take a lot of improvisation from the DM, and this is a skill that comes with practice. But the more you do it, the easier it becomes, which is nice. The point of this here is that your players don't know what's coming next. So you can have a whole load of stuff prepared, and wherever they decide to go, you can just make that stuff happen wherever they decide to go. So you are always prepared to a degree, and your players have a sense of freedom, which is what they want. So in conclusion to this, don't railroad your players. Give them their freedom, but don't let all your hard work go to waste either. Just get creative in how you integrate it into the story and how you integrate it into the players' decisions. It'll make for a more enriching game for both you and the players. Our next tip, number 3, is to allow your players to make mistakes. Now, I will preface this by saying don't be too harsh on new players. You do want them to enjoy the game, not punish them for learning. But for the more experienced players, it is okay to allow them to stick their hand into the fire just to see what happens. There can be times that players will square up to an important NPC, or they'll decide to destroy an important item. And there could be a very strong urge in the DM to want to warn them off doing that. However, if you do so, the players will never learn consequences. Consequences really can make for some of the most memorable points of a D&D game. I'll give you an example of one that I've used myself. My players were needlessly bullying a NPC for no real reason at all, and I decided that this guy was going to hold a grudge, and he did. Off they went with their story, they forgot about him. It was months and months later in real time, and then I had this NPC creep back, all powered up with a bunch of friends he gathered, and attacked the party in their sleep. They were terrified, and it created a really intense and emotionally charged encounter. It was brilliant. Situations like these can really just drive home the fact that the world that you are creating is alive, and that their actions have consequences. And this will hopefully, in turn, stop your players from becoming murder hobos, because that is a game killer, and you should really discourage that as much as possible. Tip number 4 is to have a list of names at hand. Now, this is one of my favourite tips because it has saved my skin so many times. I can't tell you how many times my players have walked into a bar, I've described a few people just randomly off the top of my head, and suddenly they take a massive interest in some random NPC I've created literally there on the spot that has as much impact to the story as the chair he's sitting on has. And I have no name for him, I have no story for him, I have nothing. And I have to create it all on the spot. And I am absolutely shockingly bad at coming up with names on the spot. Usually goblins are called Goblin or Boblin or Moblin. Something real dumb. So try and avoid this. It just kind of gets plain embarrassing at some points, to be honest. So to counteract this, I created a massive list of names. People's names, place names, shop names, food names, drink names, drug names, just names for everything. And I have it all sitting on a Word document on my computer, which is where I keep all my information. And whenever any player asks me, who is this random person, I flick over to my Word document, pull up a random name, and I have a not stupid sounding name. A great tool that I've been using nearly since I started DMing is a website called Fantasy Name Generator. It's fantastic. It's got names for literally everything that you could think of. So I would go and give that a look, because trust me, it's a lifesaver. The next tip is flavor. Flavor is everything. By flavor, I mean describing. Now, this is one of the parts of being a DM that I actually enjoy the most. Describing things as they're happening, and you really just painting a word picture as your players enter a new area or they meet a new person, or even in the middle of a fight. In fights especially, I find that they can be a bit of a drawn out affair if you're not careful. As a DM, your primary goal is to keep your players engaged and interested. And this can be especially difficult in battles, especially the ones that take 20 or 30 minutes. And if you've got 5 or 6 players around the table, it can be 10 or 12 or 15 minutes before a player gets a turn again. This can be a lot of downtime for the player to lose interest and not really care about what's going on. So to counteract this, what I do is I describe the attacks as they're happening. Don't just say that you attack, you do 4 damage. Congrats, next player. You can describe how the sword swings and cuts a slice through the goblin's stomach and a bit of entrails fall out. Or you can describe the wizard flicking through a spellbook, eyes alight with arcane symbols. Or you can describe your kung fu monk, Jackie Channing and Bruce Leeing his way all across the battlefield. Bonus points again if your players start doing this themselves, allow them to do it. It takes the downtime away from the battle and engages your players more with what they're doing. The next tip is music. Everyone loves music. It's everywhere in our lives and it's used to great effect to invoke emotion in the listener. Having some music in the background in your D&D game can be a big jump forward in the immersion you can provide to your players. If you want your players pumped up for a big boss battle, then you can find some music that'll really hype them up. If you want to create a sense of dread, then just play some horror movie music. If they'd entered into a lively tavern, then have the sounds of other patrons talking and music being played in the background. Again, all this helps with immersion and it helps draw your players more into the world and into the scenario that you're trying to create. Now there are loads and loads and loads and loads of creative playlists on both Spotify and on YouTube. You just need to type in what you're looking for and you'll find countless playlists. It's up to you to just flick through the ones that suit your game best. The last tip we'll be working on then is player management. Now, player management can be one of the most complicated parts of being a DM, and this is mainly due to the fact that you are working with real people who have real opinions, real personalities, and these can sometimes clash. Unfortunately, as the DM, it usually falls to you to step in and smooth things over and ease the tensions a bit that may be growing. The first thing to do here is to identify what the problem is, talk to the people then involved, and try and come to some sort of agreement or compromise. If the player persists and continues to do the behaviour that is annoying everyone else or is annoying you even, then you have to be more firm and ask them to quite plainly to stop what they're doing. And this rarely happens now, but if they continue to be an annoyance and a nuisance and a disruption to the game, well then maybe they don't deserve to be part of your game. And I say that meaning that people come to play D&D for fun, for escapism, not to be hassled more. Life's hard enough as it is, and when you come to play a fantasy game where you escape into make-believe worlds, you don't want to have somebody at your table who is arguing with you constantly and butting heads. Arguments will happen because that's how people work, but I'm talking more of a constant thing. That's the kind of thing you need to step in and put a stop to. Remember though, that you are trying to solve the problem, not attack a person. Calm, collected, smooth. Listen to everyone's point of view and try and make things smooth so that everything works. I personally have never come across this situation, and I actually don't know anyone personally who has, but you do hear the stories on Reddit and all that, and how much of those are true you don't know, but they are out there, so it's just something to be aware of. So there you go, there are my 7 tips to help you improve your DMing skills. I'm sure that there are things out there that people might find more useful, so if I've left anything out, please put it down in the comments. And with that, I want to thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you in our next video. Goodbye.